The only thing I know is that I know nothing. He was declared the wisest man in all of Greece by a god. And yet, this was his conclusion. A man whose name is the very foundation of Western philosophy, a name etched into the bedrock of our entire civilization, died a convicted criminal, sentenced to death by his own people. He never wrote a single book, held no office, and owned almost nothing. So let me ask you this. How does a man who claims to know nothing, who produces nothing, and who dies in utter disgrace, become the ultimate architect of the modern mind? And what if the secret to his immortal success lies not in his wisdom, but in the very thing that got him killed? Welcome to the 500 Millionaire Blueprint. I'm your host, and today, we are not talking about stock portfolios or tech startups. We're talking about wealth creation of a different kind, the wealth of the mind, the kind that lasts for millennia. The man, of course, is Socrates. We know his legacy, the Socratic method, the endless pursuit of truth, the teacher of Plato, who in turn taught Aristotle. Almost every framework of logic, ethics, and strategic thinking we use today can be traced back to this one, barefoot, notoriously unattractive man who wandered the dusty streets of ancient Athens. His success isn't measured in gold, but in the operating system he installed in the human brain. But this isn't a history lesson. This is a blueprint. And the story you think you know is wrong. The traditional narrative is that he was a brilliant teacher martyred for his genius. That's too simple. It's a clean, tidy story that robs him of his power. The real story is messier, more dangerous, and far more useful to you and me. So here is our big question for today. What if the greatest obstacle to your self-development, your success, and your happiness isn't a lack of knowledge, but the deadly comfort of the knowledge you think you already possess? What if you had to become a fool to truly become wise? Forget the statues. Forget the marble halls and the togas. I want you to come with me to a different place. A small, dark, stone cell in 399 B.C. The air is damp, smelling of earth and despair. This is where Socrates, a man in his 70s, is waiting to die. This isn't just a low point, this is the abyss. His entire life's work, his purpose-driven mission, has led him here. Not to a place of honor, but to a cold floor and a cup of poison hemlock. Imagine the isolation. The city he loved, the people he spent his life trying to help, had turned on him. His friends weep outside his cell, begging him to escape. He refuses. What was the final, fatal mistake that landed him here? Was it misjudging the jury? Was it his arrogant, almost taunting defense speech? No. Those were just symptoms. His greatest mistake, in the eyes of the world, was a decision he made decades earlier. He decided to wage a one-man war, but not against a person or an army. Socrates' true enemy was invisible, insidious, and lived inside every single person he met. Let's call this enemy the tyranny of certainty. This enemy was the master craftsman who could build a perfect chariot, but claimed that expertise gave him absolute knowledge of justice. It was the celebrated poet who could move thousands with his words, but believed his talent made him an expert on goodness. It was the powerful politician who could win any debate, but confused his rhetorical skill with genuine wisdom. The tyranny of certainty is the voice in our head that whispers, "You've got it all figured out. You're the expert. Stop asking questions. It's safer to be sure." Socrates saw this enemy for what it was, a cage for the human mind, an elegant, comfortable prison that prevents all growth, all innovation, all true self-development. And so he committed his life to a single, relentless act, walking up to the most powerful, respected people in Athens, and, with a few simple, almost childlike questions, proving to them that they, in fact, knew nothing at all about the things that mattered most. He didn't do it to humiliate them, he did it to free them. But no one thanks you for telling them their entire life is built on a fragile assumption. They thank you by calling you a corrupter of youth. They thank you by sentencing you to death. The price he paid was everything. His reputation, his freedom, his life, all sacrificed at the altar of a question. And in that dark cell, surrounded by failure, he had to be asking himself, was it worth it? So what's the lesson here? In a world obsessed with personal branding, networking, and influence, Socrates' path looks like a manual on how to fail. He alienated powerful people, he built no coalition, he created no product. The conventional lesson would be careful what you say. Don't rock the boat. But that's not the blueprint, is it? The real, counterintuitive lesson from his death cell is this: significance is not the same as success. His goal was never to be popular, it was to be a catalyst, a lightning strike that illuminates the landscape, even if the bolt itself is consumed in the process. He taught us that true change doesn't come from providing comforting answers, it comes from asking terrifying questions. It's a motivational truth that's hard to swallow. To make a real impact, you might have to be misunderstood. You might have to let it burn, the it being the approval of others. You have to be willing to stand alone. You have to be willing to stay hard in your convictions, even when the world demands you soften. Okay, so let's rewind. How does someone even start on this path? Let's leave the prison cell and go back to the beginning, to the sun-drenched marketplace of Athens. Socrates wasn't born a philosopher. He was a stonemason, a man who worked with his hands. So what flipped the switch? It was a strange declaration from the oracle at Delphi, the most sacred voice in the ancient world. The oracle declared that no man was wiser than Socrates. Now, a normal person hears this, and their ego inflates. They write a book, start a consulting firm, they leverage the ultimate endorsement. But Socrates' reaction was one of profound confusion, because he believed he knew nothing. This wasn't fake humility. This was his core reality. So he began his quest not to prove the oracle right, but to prove it wrong. This is the critical shift in mindset. He started with the assumption that he was ignorant, and that assumption gave him the ultimate superpower: curiosity without ego. He would approach a general and say, "You are a master of warfare. Please, teach me. What is courage?" He'd ask a judge, "You dispense it every day. Help me understand. What is justice?" He listened with genuine interest, but then he'd ask a follow-up, and another, until, inevitably, the expert's definition would crumble, revealing a foundation of sand. But here's where we apply the flaw spotlight. Socrates wasn't a perfect, gentle guide. He was annoying. Deeply, profoundly annoying. His method, this relentless questioning, often came across as condescending. He would feign ignorance in a way that made the other person feel foolish. Plato, his student, paints a heroic picture, but you can read between the lines. People didn't just disagree with Socrates, many of them couldn't stand him. His greatest tool was also his most alienating flaw. He lacked the modern skill of emotional intelligence to soften the blow. He gave people the pure, unvarnished truth of their own ignorance, and it was a bitter pill to swallow. He was still wrestling with this flaw, even at his own trial. He spoke to the jury not as a defendant trying to win them over, but as a teacher trying to correct them. It was a catastrophic misreading of the room. He was a man so committed to his philosophy that he couldn't turn it off, even to save his own life. It makes him tragically, beautifully human. And it reminds us that our greatest strengths and our most dangerous flaws are often two sides of the same coin. The discipline he had in his search for truth was matched by a lack of discipline in his social tact. So, how do we use this? How do we channel the Socratic method without getting exiled from our communities? We can turn his life's work into a practical tool for our own study motivation and personal growth. Let's call it the certainty audit. It's a 3-step formula. You can apply it to your business, your career development, or your personal life. Step 1. Identify a bedrock belief. Take one area of your life. It could be, "I'm not a good public speaker," or "Our customers want this specific feature," or "The only way to get rich is to work 80 hours a week." Find a belief you hold as an absolute, unshakable truth. Write it down. Step 2. Become the childish toddler. You know how a toddler just keeps asking, why? Do that to your bedrock belief. Our customers want feature X. Why? Because they said so in a survey. Why did they say that? Because they think it will solve their problem. Why do they have that problem? Because their current workflow is inefficient. Why is it inefficient? Keep asking why until you move past the surface level symptom and arrive at the root cause. You'll often find the solution you were so certain about is actually a patch for a much deeper issue. This is the path to real clarity. Step 3. Define the opposite. Actively argue for the exact opposite of your bedrock belief. Spend 10 minutes forcing your brain to build a case for it. I am a great public speaker. What would be true if that were the case? Working less than 40 hours a week is the key to my wealth creation. What strategies would I employ? This isn't about delusion. It's about breaking down the rigid neural pathways of your own certainty. It's a workout for your mind, forcing it to become more flexible and creative. This is how you develop a true abundance mindset, by realizing that options exist where you once saw a dead end. This simple, 3-step process is a form of daily discipline. It's a commitment to intellectual honesty. It's your defense against the tyranny of certainty. We started with a statement from a man condemned to die. The only thing I know is that I know nothing. At the beginning, it sounded like a statement of failure, of nihilism. But now we hear it differently, don't we? It's not a confession of emptiness. It is the most powerful motivational statement in human history. It is the ultimate declaration of an open mind. It's the sound of a cup emptying itself, so it can be filled anew. I know nothing is the starting line, not the finish line. It's the prerequisite for every discovery, every innovation, every single step of human progress. It is the only mindset that allows for infinite growth. Socrates' death wasn't a failure. It was the final, irrefutable proof of his philosophy. He was so certain of his ignorance, so committed to the journey of questioning, that he would rather die than claim to have an answer he didn't possess. He chose intellectual freedom over physical survival, and in doing so, he achieved immortality. The blueprint he left us isn't about building an empire of gold. It's about cultivating an inner kingdom of clarity and peace. It's the understanding that life is not about arriving at a final destination of perfect knowledge. It's about learning to love the journey, to be grateful for the questions, to find joy in the mystery. It's about accepting our beautiful, flawed, and incomplete humanness. So I leave you with this. In a world that screams at you to have an opinion, to pick a side, to be an expert, find the courage to say, I don't know. Find the strength to ask one more question. Focus on yourself, on your own journey of discovery. Because the moment you stop seeking, the moment you become certain, is the moment you stop growing. Be grateful for what you don't know. It is the most abundant resource you will ever have. Stay hard on your principles, but stay soft in your curiosity. That is the path to a life not just of success, but of meaning. What is one certainty in your life that you're now willing to question? Share your story in the comments below. We read every single one. And if this message resonated with you, subscribe to the 500 Millionaire Blueprint. We're on this spiritual journey of self-development together.